Good morning. I am calling this meeting of the Phoenix AMA Groundwater Users Advisory Council to order. The date is November 18th, 2019, and the time is 9:35. We're meeting at the Arizona Department of Water Resources, 1110 West Washington Street, 3rd floor, conference room, 3175, Phoenix, Arizona. I am Stephen Cleveland, Chair. Would the members of our board here introduce themselves? Start with Frank.
Hello, I'm Frank Fairbanks.
Dave.
Good morning, I'm Dave Roberts from Salt River Project.
And I'm Ron Rayner.
We do have a quorum, therefore, I'm asked the AMA staff, please introduce yourselves.
Einat Henningson, Active Management Area Section with the Department of Water Resources.
Kennedy Shepard, AMA GUAC Coordinator.
Let's start with agenda item number 2, the ADWR current activities update. Einat.
Mr. Cleveland, the second agenda item will be the Phoenix Active Management Area
I'm
Draft Management Plan.
I'm only reading from my script here.
Apologies for that.
Okay. Throw that out. Let's go to the agenda. Phoenix AMA Draft 4th Management Plan recommendations. Yes.
Good morning, Chairman Cleveland and members of the Council. Ooh, let me get organized here. All right. My name is Natalie Mast, and I'm the Program Manager working on the management plans here at ADWR. Today I'll be providing an update on our progress on the draft Phoenix AMA 4th Management Plan and on the development of the 5th Management Plan. So, earlier this year, ADWR initiated a renewed effort to make progress on the active management area management plans, starting with the completion of the remaining 3 4th management plans, and starting with the publication of a draft Phoenix 4th management plan back in July. We've had a lot of conversations and have come a long way since July, and I'm very happy to be here today to discuss the next steps in that path forward for the Phoenix Active Management Area. At the last GUAC meeting in September, we discussed options A and B that are up on the screen right now, and this board voted to support option A. We also discussed these options with the Governor's Council and others. Tom considered that feedback carefully, and we decided to move forward with option A. We held a Phoenix Active Management Area 4th Management Plan stakeholder meeting on October 16th to allow additional space and time for stakeholder feedback and for questions and comments on that draft Phoenix 4th Management Plan. And then we also accepted informal comments, both written and verbal, through November 8th. We have received a broad range of comments on each of the items that we've discussed for the Phoenix Draft 4th Management Plan, both in support and in opposition on various points. We've had many conversations and have worked extensively with various representatives from these regulated communities and have made a couple of refinements to the original proposal based on these conversations. We have had a very high level of stakeholder engagement as we've worked through this process, and we very much appreciate the time and effort taken by those who submitted comments or otherwise participated in this process. All of those written comments that we received are now posted on the management plan's website on ADWR's webpage, along with an updated draft of that management plan, incorporating some of those refinements. So Next steps for the draft Phoenix Forest Management Plan is to move toward the legal adoption of that plan. Last week, we posted the updated draft Forest Management Plan online, so we're kind of in item 3 as you look at the kind of summary timeline across the top there. And we are moving toward beginning the promulgation or the legal adoption process for that draft. So that promulgation or legal adoption process is this is a very high-level summary. There's more steps even than I included on this slide. But so it's kind of an extensive process, but it begins with a promulgation order that the ADWR director would sign, and 30 to 60 days later, we would have a hearing. That promulgation order opens a formal comment period, which is closed on the date of the hearing. And the hearing includes a presentation overview of the Forest Management Plan of the draft that we would be promulgating, and an opportunity to submit formal verbal comments at that time also. After that hearing, ADWR would publish a summary of findings based on the comments received, and then move toward the final adoption of that plan. 2 years after we notice that final adoption is when those plans are able to go into effect, and we typically when the conservation programs contained in those plans are able to go into effect. And we typically move the effective date of the conservation programs to the beginning of the following year just to match up with our annual reporting timelines. The role of the GUAC here with regards to the management plans is to make comments on the management plans before they are promulgated. We've been working through that since July with the publication of the initial draft. We do very much appreciate the time and detail that went into each of your comments. And so with that, today, we are here to respectfully request that the GUAC support the promulgation of the draft Phoenix Active Management Area Forest Management Plan. And I have a couple more slides on the fifth management plan, but we can kind of pause here and discuss that point if it would please the council.
So I will open this discussion up with asking each of the members if they have any further comments that they'd like to make about the Forest Management Plan. Frank, would you like?
Oh,
okay, Ron.
Mr. Chairman, you know, I do have a concern. I don't recall if there's a provision in the plan or in the operations of it that would allow an appeal. And I'm thinking specifically of the water duties. If some of those reductions that are proposed to be made, the 10% reductions, would cause a hardship, does an affected party have the opportunity to appeal that?
Sure. So there's two kind of processes associated for that sort of thing. A variance would allow kind of a temporary change to a conservation requirement. I'm not remembering the exact timeline associated with that off the top of my head. I apologize. But we can provide you additional information on that. The other option associated with that sort of thing, it would last for the length of the conservation programs under that management plan, and that's called an administrative review. So there are two kind of sort of parallel processes that provide opportunity for that sort of individual case exception.
Natalie, are those spoken to in the plan?
Yes, they are. Those are, the details for those, I believe, are in Chapter 10 of the plan.
Yeah, those were actually original, weren't they? It seemed like I recall that there was a provision on that.
When can those be exercised?
I wouldn't want to misquote the details on that. I'm not remembering the exact details of that, but I believe it can be. I don't want to misquote the details on that and get that wrong. Okay. Sorry about that. I can follow up with you on that another time.
Go ahead.
Based on the meetings that you've had and the comments you've received so far, do you anticipate there being any opposition to the conservation requirements that you've been able to work through?
So we have received comments on both sides of various parts of the draft Phoenix Fourth Management Plan. We believe that the best path forward for us is the draft kind of as written. We believe that we have worked with many members of the regulated communities in order to make sure that the provisions here are a functional path forward for this fourth management plan. So perhaps there will need to be exceptions to specific individuals, but kind of the broad framework here we believe is a good compromise, and we believe that we have good buy-in on it from the regulated community.
Okay. Frank.
After reviewing the plan several times and reading through it very carefully, my perception is that this is the plan that's coming forward is sort of a fine-tuning, where we're making limited changes, and while I'm not sure everybody's ecstatic about the changes being made in their area, these are changes that are limited, but are moving us in the direction of improving our water future. And I think it's just absolutely critical that we move ahead. We have a growing population. We have need for water for agriculture. We have need for water for industry. It's just absolutely crucial that we continue to move ahead with this program that has been so successful for the city. So I think it's well done. I think we all have to realize that the next step, the fifth management plan, is liable to be a lot tougher, because my sense is that we've deferred the toughest issues to the fifth management plan, and I think that's appropriate because we should have the time to work together, allowing everybody a chance to find solutions that work. But that this is not an issue that we can say, well, we've done enough, we never have to do any more. We know our population is growing. We know that our resources are not and will not grow significantly, and so I am supportive of the plan. I appreciate the input and the involvement of everybody in all of the involved industries, and people have put a lot of time into this and shared their ideas with staff, and I want to congratulate this, because I think in the end, if the fourth management plan is going to work, and if the fifth management plan is going to work, they have to be plans that we all understand and that we've all worked through, and that we understand the difficulties and we understand how we win by moving our program ahead. Thank you.
My comments are very similar. I would like to echo the Vice Chair's observation and complimenting all the parties in their coming together and making this the best plan that we can at this time, and recognize that just around as we step out of this door, we'll step into the next process. Natalie, have fun with that. And I do appreciate the level of detail that you do provide us in terms of moving forward. It's before we ask for action by the council, I would like to offer to anyone in the audience opportunity, if you have any further comments before we take a motion to support proceeding with the promulgation of the fourth management plan. Any comments? Okay. What was that? Does everybody have to now leave? Is this a fire break? No? Okay, seeing no comments from the audience, I would request a motion to support proceeding with the promulgation of the fourth management plan.
So moved.
Frank? Dave Roberts. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to support proceeding with promulgation of the fourth management plan to be set forward in a recommendation to the director, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay. So with that, we will go ahead and move on to a little extra information about that fifth management plan process. So as we are working to complete these remaining fourth management plans, we have also started a process to begin the research and stakeholder outreach needed to develop the fifth management plan. That is occurring under the Management Plans Work Group, or MPWG, as you see here on the slide. So So we are doing that concurrently, hoping to wrap up the adoption of the remaining fourth management plans by the end of next year. And we'll also be continuing the work of the Management Plans Work Group through next year. So we are kind of in the early stages of this work group of the fifth management plan, working through some data analysis, program analysis of the existing programs, after which we will move more into kind of the policy side of using that data analysis to develop, further develop the existing programs or to develop new programs for the fifth management plans. We hope to largely wrap up the work of that Management Plans Work Group around the end of 2020 so that we can use 2021 to draft all 5 fifth management plans. And then during 2022, we would conduct the legal adoption process for those 5 fifth management plans. Because of that 2-year lag that I mentioned earlier, that would make those fifth management plans effective, the conservation programs in the fifth management plans effective in 2025. So as I mentioned, we are kind of, our status is kind of in the analysis stage for the existing conservation programs. We do have an agricultural subgroup meeting this afternoon at 2 p.m. in the same room, so we would certainly invite all of you to participate in that. And we also have a meeting of the full work group on December 4th at 2 p.m. We will be scheduling additional subgroups and additional meetings of that group after that time. And with that, that's all I have. We do have a lot of information available online on our website, both meeting materials and that sort of thing. And if anyone is interested in receiving emails on the progress of that Management Plans Work Group or meeting invitations, you can email us at managementplans@azwater.gov. And with that, that's the end of my slides. I really do want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. We very much appreciate it. We are very happy to be seeing progress on these fourth management plans. And with that, I will take any additional questions.
Any questions, comments? You do such a fantastic job. We're in awe. Thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing everybody's continued participation moving forward. Okay. Let's move on to agenda item number 3, Arizona Water Bank and Bank Authority Preliminary 2020 Plan of Operation.
A little bit shorter than Natalie.
Hi, Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. Good morning. For the record, Virginia O'Connell, Director of the Arizona Water Banking Authority. So before I talk about the 2020 preliminary plan, I'd like to just give a very brief update on where we are with this year's plan of operation, 2019 plan. So as you may recall, after over 20 years of the water bank storing water, this year was the first year that there was no water available to the bank for storage. So we had to rely on other means in order to continue to meet our objectives. Without water, we still managed to stay very busy. So for 2019, We've purchased over 19,000 acre-feet of long-term storage credits, just over 13,000 in the Phoenix AMA, and just over 6,000 in the Tucson AMA. No credits were purchased in the Pinal AMA. We also accrued what we're calling intentionally created surplus firming credits. So I'll give a little, because that's something new, I'll give a little background of what that is. So under the Arizona implementation plan for the Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan, there's two components, the mitigation component and the offset component. Under the offset component, the Gila River Indian community plans to create 200,000 acre-feet of intentionally created surplus, or ICS. Of that amount, 50,000 acre-feet, the bank had agreed to fund the creation of 50,000 acre-feet. The U.S. will be funding the creation of 100,000 acre-feet. So of the creation of the 50,000 acre-feet, so this water is being created, the 200,000, to offset any intentionally created surplus that is utilized from Lake Mead to create mitigation water during years of shortage. Okay, so it gets a little confusing, so I'm going slow on this. So of the 50,000 that's created, there's a one-time 10% cut for losses and evaporation, which means the 50,000 results in 45,000 acre-feet of intentionally created surplus credits. Under the Water Bank's agreement with the community, those ICS credits become ICS firming credits because we paid for the creation of that ICS. So that's it in a nutshell. So for 2019, the community created 17,000 acre-feet of ICS, and next year they plan to create the remaining 33,000. So of the 17,000 acre-feet of ICS, the Water Bank was able to purchase 14,660 acre-feet, which resulted in just over the 13,000 acre-feet of ICS firming credits, taking into consideration that 10% cut. Okay, so that's where we are. I wanted to give a little bit more in-depth explanation on that because I'll touch again on it in the 2020 plan.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Frank.
I've forgotten, what is the level, and of course the Water Bank's responsible for firming credits for the various agreements. What is the level of firming credits that is due to GRIC?
How much do we anticipate we will need to firm?
Yes.
Okay, I'll touch on that again, but while the amount is 350,000 acre-feet. That's what the estimate was under the Indian Firming Study Commission.
So this 50 reduces the 300, or I mean the 300.
It adds. It helps us get to the 300.
Complies with them.
Yeah.
Is the 100 from the feds, which would be reduced to what, 90? Does that also go towards firming, or does that go for other federal uses?
It will go for firming. Most likely, I believe the U.S. is going to be firming the Tohono O'odham Nation, their responsibility under that.
Thank you.
Dave.
Virginia, I'm interested in the funding sources for creating the firming credits on the river.
Okay, so, and I will touch on that again, but we have been using the withdrawal fees collected in the Phoenix and the Pinal AMA, and we've used every penny that we had available to us because the cost per acre foot for creating or funding the creation of ICS starts at $240 an acre foot. That's the 2019 rate. Mm-hmm. And then it increases by 3% each year, non-compounded, so it's 3% on the 240. And so the more we can purchase up front, the less expensive it will be.
Okay.
So so next year's is 247.20. the other thing to take into consideration is that this next year will be the last year that we have the withdrawal fees available from the Pinal AMA, because those monies will be used by DWR to distribute to Pinal irrigation districts for the efficiency program there. So after that, we can only rely on the withdrawal fees from the Phoenix AMA, and just a little evaluation of that, it looks like it'll take us through the whole interim period through 2027 to pay for the 50,000 acre feet.
Are the withdrawal fees the only funding sources for the ICS creation on the river by the community, or could you use other sources?
Well, absent a general fund appropriation, those are the only source of monies that we have available, and we haven't seen a general fund appropriation in quite some time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
So, for 2020, we will be in a Tier 0 condition, which means, well, there's no shortage. Under DCP, Arizona has to contribute 192,000 acre feet of water to Lake Mead. Most of that, well, that means that there will be no excess CAP water available to the bank, and possibly also a little bit going into the ag pool. So again, we need to look at achieving our goals using other means, and we are looking again at long-term storage credit purchases and the creation of additional ICS firming credits. We also will not be storing water for interstate purposes. So I include the water and facility rates here. Even though we don't have water for delivery, these are still the dollar figures that we use that factor into our credit purchases. So when we're purchasing credits, we look at the water delivery rate plus what the storage rate would have been, and then gross that up by the percentage of the losses and the cut to the aquifer. In the event that there is excess water available during the year, possible turn back water, if it becomes available, we already have all the rates posted in the plan. So the water delivery rate is at $211 per acre foot. That's an increase of $12 per acre foot for this year. All the other rates have stayed the same, except for the water storage rate for the Tucson water facilities. That goes up 3% each year. So under the 2020 plan, if you look on the left-hand column there, the withdrawal fees, those are the amounts we anticipate having available for 2020. They take into consideration the legislative transfers from the Water Banking Fund. So if you recall, for fiscal year 2020, there's about just over $1.4 million that the legislature authorized other entities to use. That, again, includes the 200,000 acre feet for ANSAC, the Arizona Navigable Stream Adjudication Commission. It also includes over $1.2 million for use by the Department of Water Resources. In the last several years, ADWR has not utilized all of the monies that were made available. If that's the case again, those are monies that come back to the water bank for use. And it was one of the reasons why we were able to purchase more ICS than we anticipated for 2019. So all the way in the right-hand column, we anticipate accruing over 4,900 acre feet of ICS firming credits for the Phoenix AMA, over 3,200 acre feet of ICS firming credits for the Pinal AMA. And in the Tucson AMA, those the 2590, that is long-term storage credits we anticipate purchasing. Under the water storage tax, also known as the 4-cent ad valorem tax, CAWCD levies and collects those monies, and they have already reserved $3 million for Maricopa and $3 million for Pima County for water bank credit purchases. And if we are successful in purchasing all those credits, we're looking at over 12,000 in each of those AMAs. So the plan for 2020 is just over $8.8 million, and we hope to accrue 35,600 acre-feet of credits. So what would that mean with regard to our goals? For our M&I firming goals in Phoenix, that means we could get up to 98% of having achieved our goal in that AMA. The Pinal AMA, we're not purchasing credits for M&I firming. In the Tucson AMA, it would bring us to 58%. Withdrawal fees can also be utilized for M&I firming, and if we included the 107,000 acre-feet of credits there, that would bring us up to 70% of having achieved our goal there. For groundwater management, and again, those are the withdrawal fees, these are credits that have not yet been dedicated for any purpose. Water management includes M&I firming and Indian firming, so those credits could also be used for those purposes. And again, for the Tucson AMA, we do anticipate that they would be utilized for M&I firming. On-river firming has been the same for many, many years, as we have not received a general fund appropriation, and we're at 96% there. And for Indian firming, here's the 350 that we mentioned earlier. So these include all credits that have been dedicated to date. It includes the water that was stored on reservation, where we accrued long-term storage credits before the Arizona Water Settlements Act became enforceable. That was about 105,000 acre-feet of long-term storage credits. It includes the similar firming credits. Those were the payment for the offsetting payments for water deliveries to the reservation. That's about 44,000 acre-feet of firming credits. And then it also includes the ICS firming credits that we included in for 2019 and what we anticipate accruing in 2020. So with all of that, we would be at 49%.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Virginia, thank you. I have a question about the firming obligation to the Gila River Indian community. Is that an obligation of both the Phoenix AMA withdrawal fees and the Pinal AMA? It
includes both.
Is there some split that the bank has decided how that would work?
So when we stored water before the settlement became enforceable, there were actually two water storage permits, one for Phoenix and one for Pinal, and we utilized the monies that were available at that time for each AMA. But I think even though the water storage permits were separate, I think we confirm the entire community with both sides of those credits.
Okay. But there's no split that the banking authority has agreed on between how much of the 350,000 would come from the Phoenix AMA versus the Pinal AMA?
No, it's been a factor of how the funding source, how much revenue do we have each year.
So it looks like we have a lot of credits in the three AMAs based on withdrawal fees for groundwater management. Has there been any discussion about what groundwater management means relative to the use of those credits?
We haven't dedicated any of those because we felt, let's wait and see what happens. So the Indian Firming Study Commission, they did the modeling and they estimated 350,000. But I want to be clear that that's an estimate. Mm-hmm. We're on the hook for whatever it is. Right. It could be more. It could be less. Through
2107.
Correct.
Okay.
For the 100 years. So we haven't, the credits that we've dedicated were all those that we accrued on reservation. And so the other AMA credits that we have could be used for future settlements. So there's the White Mountain Apache. There could be the Hualapai that's under discussion. So it's not just for the GRIC.
Okay. So the groundwater management credits, those credits can only be used against achieving safe yield, or what other reasons would you use the groundwater management credits for?
So I think, historically, withdrawal fees, it provided a water management just through the storage of the water itself, because it reduced groundwater pumping. Again, we can use it for M&I firming. We can use it for Indian firming. I don't know that this would happen, but it could also be that the director could come to the Water Banking Commission and say, could you extinguish credits in this area?
Okay.
Those are different things that the credits could be used.
So those withdrawal fees could be used for M&I firming?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and we didn't dedicate them because we don't know how much of a firming obligation are we going to have for Indian firming. If we don't, maybe we need them for M&I firming, although Indian firming is a lower priority. We would have more of a firming obligation there than for M&I firming.
Okay. I can't recall, but on the White Mountain settlement, the firming obligation that the bank has, is that for all of the non-Indian ag supply that would be available to the White Mountain Apache tribe?
Yeah, so on the future settlements, they estimated it would be 200,000 acre-feet of firming, roughly. So the White Mountain Apache, the proportion of that would be between 90,000.
Okay.
And those are all the lessees.
Right. Okay. So that 350 is really, when it comes to, with respect to all Indian firming, really 550,000.
Correct.
Okay. And that came from the Indian Firming Study Commission. Yeah.
Study Commission, yeah. Now, DCP could change depending on what type of, how things work on the river after. That could be, increase that number.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have at this point. Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions before we continue?
Well, that was my last slide, but I did want to say that the full plan will be going out to the public for comment, and we do appreciate any comments that you could provide to us. Written is always better. And the plan will be, the next water bank meeting will be December 4th at 10 a.m. in this room.
Individual comments. Yes, Frank.
I just want to thank you for coming in and explaining this and giving us a chance to ask questions and make sure that we understand it. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this for us.
Thank you.
Ron, any comments?
No, I don't have any.
Dave, any further?
Not really. I mean, one of the things that we debated at the last GUAC meeting was the funding that comes from the withdrawal fees to the banking authority, and how, at least in the Phoenix AMA and the Tucson AMA, that the statute's pretty specific that $2.50 must be provided to the banking authority, whereas in the Pinal AMA, I think it says up to $2.50 or something like that, but there's a little bit more flexibility. And so we keep having the debate about funding for other things within the Phoenix AMA. And so, part of our discussion was to see whether or not there was any interest, at least from the GUAC, about making a recommendation, or at least having some discussion with the banking authority about modifying that statute to give the GUAC a little bit more flexibility on the funding as well. Has there been any discussion like that among the banking authority commissioners in any way, shape, or form?
No, but then our last meeting was in September, so
okay.
Maybe that didn't coordinate. But I would say you're probably not thinking of increasing the amount. But we are purchasing the ICS that's being created. That benefits all of us. because it helps to keep the water level increased in Lake Mead. And I didn't mention this earlier, but those credits cannot be used to firm the community until after 2027.
Sure. Yeah.
So that water stays in the Lake Mead, and it does benefit everybody. And again, the less money we have, the longer it will take to pay that off, and then the more expensive it becomes too.
Sure, I understand. We all have a limited pot of money, and we're trying to figure out the best way to utilize it. So, and I understand the bank's obligations, and I think I even participated on the Indian Firming Study Commission, so I was aware that there is that obligation. I wasn't aware that the management credits could be used for M&I firming as well, or other types of things. I thought it had to be utilized either for some activity relative to achieving the goals within the AMA and or Indian firming. So I appreciate the additional information.
I think it was actually out of that Indian Firming Study Commission that they added that language.
Yeah. I'm getting old and I forgot. So thank you very much.
Virginia, go back to the beginning of your presentation. You were saying that in 2020, the Pinal AMA withdrawal fees end, and how they redirected.
Yeah.
Can you clarify that?
So under the DCP, starting next year, so the monies that are being collected in 2020, levied in 2020, become available in 2021.
Right.
The following year. Beginning in that year, those monies are no longer available to the water bank. Instead, they will be made available to the department, who will then distribute those monies in the Pinal AMA for the efficiency project, for the groundwater efficiency. I forget the name.
It's called the Groundwater and Irrigation Efficiency Project Fund.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
That will last until 2027. Then the monies will come back to the bank.
Okay. So it's an interim borrowing.
Well, borrowing is one term.
without replacement. But it's like Social Security. It's borrowed by Congress, never to be replaced.
Yeah.
You know. Okay. And what is the conclusion drawn by? If you go to your other slide there, that one. In terms of the progress statement, I mean, how does the state, how does everybody else feel about having made an estimate and been this close to achieving the goal?
That we actually got to 98%?
Yes.
Well, I think with the decline in excess water availability, and then in 2014, the bank's ability to purchase long-term storage credits has helped get us to that goal. It really helped in the Tucson AMA. I think everyone's probably pretty cheery about it, except in Tucson. But I think the bank has always said if there's water available, funding and capacity, then we would probably still continue to store. Would we purchase credits? That would be, up for discussion as we present the following year plan of operations. Like what happens when we get to 100%?
Yeah. And I guess part of my point is, will that message ever get out to anybody that ought to hear it in the legislature, adjacent states, or even among our own consumers and users of the water, as to the value 20 years ago that we set out to do, and in fact it worked.
Yeah. Well, we have over 2 million acre-feet of credits that can be used to help cities during times of shortage, so I think that is a big deal.
Any follow-up questions? Frank, did you have?
I was going to follow up on yours. But I think something a little bit hidden in there. You mentioned it
and I think we should all be proud that we got to the high 90s, although we do need to get the Indian firming done too, although we have a little bit of time to do that. But there's been a real shift in the reality for us, and that a lot of what we've done, we were able to do when there was excess water on the river. And in fact, you know, it's almost unimaginable today, but 10, 15, 20 years ago, Arizona had this huge allotment of water that it wasn't taken. It was just going off to California, and there wasn't anybody that had the money to take the water. So I think we can be proud of this achievement, but the reality is the water situation that in large part allowed us to get there is gone, perhaps forever. We all hope there'll be a few years where we get a few years of massive rain, you know, and a freak change. But it looks like in the long run that the condition of having excess Colorado River water, that doesn't look like it's ever going to come back. So we should be very proud we've done it, but we can also say just in time, because if we're trying to do it today, I'm not sure we'd be able to have this result.
No. Dave, follow up?
I was just going to mention that basically the same thing that Frank did. I think our projections of how many credits we would need was based on what we understood the hydrology to be back when we were doing that estimate. And I think if you did look at it today, it'd probably be a higher number than it was back then. So our 98% is good, it's great, but it's probably somewhat less than that today when you look at the hydrology. The other aspect of it would be that it's great that we have these credits, and it looks good on paper, and it's nice to know that it's on paper, but it's, you know, the important part is being able to utilize those credits and recover them and utilize them in an effective way going forward as well. So I think it's great that the Banking Authority has achieved what it has achieved over the years. The next step is being able to utilize them in an effective way as we go forward. So thank you.
We're working on that too.
Ron?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. It's actually for ANAV. I'm curious about the credits that are accrued in the Phoenix AMA. Do those get deducted from our water budget within the AMA as water that's basically already committed, even though they show up as credits to us here? Do we recognize them? You know, I had the question about some time earlier about the accrued flex account credits, you know, whether or not they're deducted from basically our water budget, or balance, I should say. It's not really a budget, but the water balance. But because these credits, basically someone can withdraw them, apparently. I mean, whether it's firming water or whenever there's an occasion to withdraw it, they can be. So do they get deducted from our balance?
So what do you mean by balance?
Well, I mean, we have this budget that we look at every once in a while, how much water we're using and how close we are to safe yield. And do some of these things, they show up as it's part of the water elevation in the basin, but it's already committed. So does it get deducted from that? You know, I think of the priatophytes within our AMA that we allocate about 60,000 acre feet a year. I think that knowing that they're going to be using that much water.
So these credits are not available. They are credits to be used. But if you consider safe yield, and Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is the water that is actually being used. So the water that is being pumped compared to the water that's being recharged naturally or artificially.
Just one small point of clarification there. So yes, it's the water being used, but kind of on the other side of that, the water that we count towards safe yield is that water which is legally classified classified as groundwater. So despite these credits being stored underground, we don't count for them towards safe yields because they're not groundwater.
Thanks, Natalie.
So I'd like to add as well that when you're looking at an assured water supply, long-term storage credits are also deducted from that analysis.
Any further comments? As usual, great job, Virginia.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll see you next year.
Thank you very much.
So let's move on to the next item, which is number 4, Groundwater Conservation Grant Notice of Funding Opportunities. Melissa?
Morning. I'm just going to be going over the notice of funding opportunity that we've been working in developing the last few months. So hopefully everyone's been able to review it a little bit beforehand, and you can stop me whenever you have any questions. So we're just going to go by each section. So the introduction just is explaining the Water Management Assistance Program and what that.
Let me just clarify for those who may not be aware. I suspect we all are, but this notice of funding opportunity is in regards to the $2 million that was appropriated by the legislators in Senate Bill 1227 that will be appropriated for groundwater conservation grants. And this is the notice of funding opportunity we developed and would like comments from GOEC members and the public before we make it public. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, I should have started with that. My apologies. So just in the introduction, in that second little paragraph, it does explain the $2 million that's been appropriated. In the first paragraph, it's going over what the Water Management Assistance Program is and where we're getting the funds for that. These are two different funding resources. We just wanted to specify that in the beginning. It's being administered under the Water Management Assistance Program, but it doesn't combine with the withdrawal fee funds. In the next section is our program objectives, and we developed a definition just to kind of specify exactly what we're looking for these types of projects that we're looking for. And the definition is groundwater conservation includes strategies and technologies that protect Arizona's groundwater resources for current and future generations, which include but are not limited to the reduction in the consumption and withdrawal of groundwater, reduction in the loss and waste of water, improvement in water efficiency, and increase in the reuse and recycling of wastewater. So if we don't have any questions on that section, we'll just move on to the next page. This section is breaking the award information section and is breaking down the $2 million and what each AMA is going to be receiving. The Phoenix AMA is receiving the most with $1,245,000. We also set a minimum and a maximum for these projects, just so we're not getting a bunch of these little projects, and we're not also maxing out the entire fund. Do you have any comments or concerns about our minimum and maximum sets, or do you even want a maximum? Or
Dave, how did you decide on the allocation among the AMAs?
It was based on the population densities in the areas.
Have you gotten any feedback? Okay. Have you gotten any feedback from the other AMAs?
Yes.
About wanting more money?
Not about wanting more money. We just had some adjustments in their minimums.
Oh, okay. All right. Did they feel that the population was fair? I do, but
we haven't had any complaints yet, so.
As to the minimum and maximum, and I could live with those numbers. On the minimum side, I don't know if a little smaller wouldn't be better. And what I'd worry a little bit about is if somebody has a really good idea, but it's a 50 or a 60 or a 70 or an 80,000 idea. So in order to get considered, they have to ask for more. What? Do it over a longer period of time. Well, does that satisfy it? Is this an annual, or is this maybe that's really a good point, Dave. Are these numbers for the total project? So if it's a multiple year, if it's a 3-year project, is this the 3-year total, or is this the 1-year total? This is the
It's for the length of the project.
Okay. So somebody that had a smaller idea that was really good, and I imagine we're going to see some competition, they could do 30,000 or 35,000 for 3 years.
Correct.
And qualify.
We're up to 60 votes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And I hope.
And maybe in the meantime, I want to clarify one of the reasons why we set up a minimum is because we wanted to get the best achievements for each project. So it does take a lot of administration resources and efforts in order to write contracts to administer them. So if we were to go with lower amounts, that means there are potential for more projects, meaning there's going to be a lot more work at our end and not necessarily more bang for our buck, if you may.
Yeah, and I've been on the GUAC long enough to remember the days when we did a lot of grants, and there was just an enormous amount of work on staff, and frankly, there was so much, the state has bidding mechanisms and other lawful processes that have to go through. There got to be so much process, and the process there's a good reason, and the legislature's adopted it, so we need to follow it. But there got to be so much process that it was hard to get things through. And if you have 25 things you're going to try to get through, that's 25 processes. So there's a lot of sense to that in terms of having a situation where you actually get the money out and you make things happen in the field and you really impact the reality. And if they're too small, we just end up doing endless process. On the 500,000, if somebody has, from my perspective, if somebody came in with a 500,000 proposal, it would have to be really, really, really good. But if I hope we don't get to the place where we do 500,000 and one 245. Only because that would allow us to limit the money to 3 different sectors or devices. So I hope that all of the various economic sectors, all of the various parts of our community, or not all, but many, would have some chance to have conservation. And so some spreading of the money recognizes the reality that we're all in this together, and we all ought to be conserving, and we all ought to be improving this situation. So while I live with the 500, I hope we don't have 2 of them. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Fairbanks, if you don't mind, the GUEC may recommend to reduce that amount, and if there was a desire to make it a 300,000 or anything else, we'll definitely would like to get your recommendations on that as well.
I don't know if anybody else has that concern.
I think you have the opportunity to judge the field once it's submitted. And we can also judge how much of the funds we want to commit to one particular sector. So I think we can accommodate those as we move through the process.
Excellent. How do you feel about the 100,000 as a minimum? I know you mentioned a project for 50 to for 60,000, and even though you could duplicate it for multiple years, would that be something that you would like to consider or recommend a different number than 100,000 for a minimum project?
Any comments, thoughts? No.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
What have we done in the past?
So this grant have not been offered in many years. This is a brand new $2 million grant from the legislature, so there is no information on what has done in the past. We can.
But the GUAC has had pump tax money or withdrawal fees money to disperse.
Correct.
What have we done there?
We could refer to another or a future agenda item, but we do have a list of projects on a bigger sheet that talks about at least the current projects. We do have projects that we funded from $30,000 per year. Usually we fund it for 2 years to $300,000, so it could go as
But we never had a minimum?
We do not have a minimum for the water management assistance program, correct?
And if, Mr. Chairman, I think historically, if my memory is correct, previously there was no minimum or maximum. And I can remember way back, I think one time the GUAC sat for 3 days and heard 28 different grants.
30.
Everybody's eyes glazed over.
Yes.
But my only concern about the minimum is that I'd hate to see somebody with a good idea that was worthwhile and ought to be moved ahead that ends up sort of inflating the grant in order to be eligible.
Right.
And, so if there's really a good idea, but it was a 30,000 idea, I'd hate to see it blown up. But maybe that's not.
Well, Frank, would you be open to reducing that to, let's say, 75,000? I mean, I just don't know what a good number would be.
And I could live with 100, but I think 75 would be fine. I just worry about one of the things we had last time were several proposals from the universities, and they addressed water sectors that were very diverse. And they were good proposals, but they weren't always real large. But I think so 75 would be good.
Okay. Ron?
Okay, let's take the Phoenix AMA minimum 100 and reduce it to 75,000. Is that the recommendation?
Yes, I move that we recommend to staff that the 100 minimum be reduced to 75,000.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
If we have no more comments on that section, I'll move on to the eligible applicants section.
Can you pull your mic a little closer to you?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm soft-spoken. For the eligible applicants section, we have three criteria, 2 that are, if applicable, depending on the type of project. The program or project needs to be located within one of the 5 AMAs, and in this case, it would be within the Phoenix AMA. If applicable, the applicant must provide appropriate documentation of legal and physical access, as well as authority to implement the project. And our third criteria is, if applicable, applicant must provide appropriate documentation that any water to be used in the project is legally and physically available. So if we have no comments there, we'll move on to the grant requirements and details. This is going over a little bit more so over the what's going to be required from the applicant, as well as the types of projects that we would be considering, just to kind of give people brainstorming. The list on page 3 isn't like a definitive list. It's just something to think about. We do have our 4 categories, depending on whatever type of project they select, they would fill out on their cover page, which is located in the back. Are there any comments or additions that you would like to have on here, just for some verbiage to be seen by applicants?
Looks good.
Proceed.
Great. Next, we have our priority section. We have 4 priorities that would be given for preference for our applicants. The projects that provide an additional contribution, and that doesn't need to be just financial, it can be in kind as well. Projects with new innovative qualities, projects that demonstrate high impact compared to the other projects that are submitted, and projects that demonstrate multiple benefits. Are there any additional priorities you'd like to add, or do you have a comment on any of the 4 that are already there?
I take it these criteria are very similar to the criteria that we use for the withdrawal fees for the WMAP program. Okay.
Great.
Go ahead.
Okay, we'll move on to the payment of funds section. This is just going over how it'll be a reimbursement type of funding, and it'll be broken down based on the tasks or the deliverables that they will be providing us with, when they do receive the fund. Going on to the next section will be the application requirements and details, and this is really kind of the meat of this notice of funding opportunity. It covers each section that we'll be requiring the applicants to submit. So we'll ask them to submit a cover page, which is located on page 9. That's the cover page we'll be asking the applicants to submit. We also will ask them to submit an executive summary, a project overview, scope of work, budget breakdown and narrative, additional contribution breakdown, our project map, which is located on page 10, and the supplemental information, which would be, this is just more of this legal language concerning the evidence of physical and of legal availability of water, evidence of control and tenure of land, as well as the State Historic Preservation Office review form. That's also located in our appendix from pages 11 to 15. In this section, we also cover the applicant presentations to the GUAC. There'll be pretty brief meetings, 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll also allow the GUAC members to decide whether they want to have a pre, interim, or post-project report, depending on the types of projects. On the next page, do you have any questions about any of that? Good, okay. On the next page, we have the application assistance. That just has my contact information, my phone, and email address, just so they can contact me if they have any questions. I'll be available the entire time during the timeline of this project. Speaking of which, there's our timeline. We also will be having a grant application workshop, pre-application workshop on December 10th. I believe in the notice of funding opportunity, there's a typo there on the workshop, but a question?
All right, in your little timeline, it says December 10th, and then
yes.
Further down it says December 9th.
Yeah, that's a mistake. It should say December 10th. We were trying to decide between two dates and felt that December 10th is more appropriate. That's a Tuesday versus being a Monday. That will be from 8:30 to 10. It'll be in this room. Are there any questions or concerns about the timeline?
In the contract process, is there an expectation, or is it stated here that the projects that are funded will come and make presentations to GUAC at the end of the process, or?
That could be something that can be requested of this projects, depending on what you decide.
Why don't you put it in as a condition?
Okay.
It is written under applicant presentations to the AMA Groundwater User Advisory Council, which is the end of page 6. And it is ultimately the applicable GUAC may request a pre, interim, and post-project report. So it is up to us and the GUAC if there is project that you would like a pre, everyone get a pre-presentation, because that's how we will make recommendations on the projects to fund. But then the GUAC, depending on the project, could
so we identify the ones we believe are sufficient that deserve some discussion and presentation to us.
Correct. After we recommend and the director approve the projects that we would like to fund.
Very good. Frank, did you have a comment? Anyone else? You're doing well. Keep going.
The last section here, that's not all the attachment pages, is our review and selection criteria, and this is just going over the application requirements and details section, just to kind of reaffirm everything that we're expecting from them. And then we have our checklist, cover page, map, and State Historic Preservation Office attachments in our appendix. Do we have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Frank. Yes, Frank.
Perhaps going back to the timeline, if
page 7.
Page 7, excuse me. Page 7, the timeline. I think it's well done, and That's going to be very challenging if we get a lot of interest. There's going to be a lot to go through to make this timeline. And I note that it ends, start working on contracts is the end. Mm-hmm. But one of the things the grantees are going to be interested in is when do we start our work / when do we get our money? Mm-hmm. And the last time around, some of the biggest organizational challenges came between your last step here, start working on contracts, and signing the contracts. So I would urge you to think about some target times so that if, you get the grantees come in, they get selected, they're going to get X dollars to do this wonderful thing. They're going to be really hot to get out there and do this wonderful thing. And it helps if there is an expectation that you can make as to when their contracts are ready and they'll be able to draw on the money. And it gets to be especially complicated because some of the contract work requires work on their part. So it isn't all just staff and the state making sure that everything's done. They're going to have to submit paperwork and set up accounts and things like that. So that is something grantees will be interested in. When can they expect to start the work, and when can they expect to start drawing money? And I don't know if you can create a hard date for it, but there ought to be some generalized expectation for them because they'll need to plan staffing and gearing up and all of that. So that, I'm sure that's something when you have your first meeting you'll run into, and you're going to need to be prepared to say something. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fairbanks. I do want to mention that we have thought about it, and because we're not sure how many projects we'll receive, we have no idea how long it'll take us to write the contracts. If it's 10 projects, because we do have the 5 AMAs, so it really depends on how many we'll have to write contracts for. But that's, I think, is a good idea to start thinking of perhaps some sort of a process or a prioritization or something in that sort.
You may find as you deal with some of these proposals that some of them have some sort of time-sensitive triggering, and that some of them may be happy to wait a little while, so that may also incorporate. And, numbers are a big part of it, of how much has to be done. So the more numbers, the harder it is. But you may also find that you have new grantees that aren't used to doing this, and you have other grantees that are very sophisticated and have already done it in some other form. So it gets to be very complicated. But I know you'll do well.
Thank you, sir.
David?
I just have one question about the timing for when you receive the money. Have you already received this $2 million?
Yes, we have started receiving it in July, and we receive it in quarterly basis, so $500,000 every quarter until next July.
Okay. Right.
So we would have enough to start.
You would have the money by May 18th or right after that.
Correct.
So, okay. All right. Thank you.
And as Melissa mentioned, sorry, Mr. Chair, I just want to mention that we do fund the project as they go for deliverable, so we do not provide the money ahead of time. We always provide it after we get a deliverable or a proof of work.
A quick question, and that would be, how much of the contract is, shall I say, boilerplate? And can you come up with a form contract that is done simultaneous to some of the activities that we're about to go through, so that now the issue is down to project details?
We do have some sort of a boilerplate, but what really takes the time is the correspondence between the department and the entity, the contractor, making sure that the language is correct, that their legal entities do not have issues with our legal language. So a lot of it is the human interaction rather than the writing itself of the contracts.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, that's it for my presentation. Unless anyone has any more questions or comments.
Melissa, I didn't hear the last 10 words.
I'm very sorry.
That's okay.
That was the end of my presentation, unless anyone has any more questions or comments for me.
I will turn it to the audience. Is there any comments or observations about what you are about to do in submitting applications to Melissa? Well, have fun. You got 10 days to prepare for the schedule and get on board. Please do participate. It's very important.
Thank you.
If we don't spend the money, it'll end up in the legislature, and we don't know what that means.
Hopefully not. It is within ADWR and dedicated for these funds. So.
Right.
I also want to mention that we would like to finalize this. This is in a draft form. We would like to finalize it in the next few days, latest by the end of this week. So if you do have any comments, please do contact Melissa with any comments or additions or edits you may have.
Very good. Thank you. We're ready for the next one? Next item. Item number 5, the withdrawal fees and the WMAP update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the council, members of the public. I want to go over really quickly some of our water management assistance program activities and the 2020 withdrawal fee rates. And starting with the table that, actually the other table, we should have it hopefully. Okay. So I did it again. You should have this table in front of you. Apologies for the public, we do not have it on our screen, but it's something that we've showed in the past several meetings. We have a breakdown of the past 5 years withdrawal fees activities and some of the funds that were collected throughout the years for each fee portion, as well as the total withdrawals. The table that you have in front of you breaks down the 2020 withdrawal fees for all the 5 AMAs. And I just want to mention that last meeting, GOEC members made a split recommendation regarding the 2020 withdrawal fees. 2 members recommended to maintain the water management assistance program portion of the fee at 25 cents, and 2 members recommended to increase the water management assistance program fee from 25 cents to 50 cents. The director carefully considered both of these recommendations. He also considered the additional $1,245,000 in grant money that will be available, as we just discussed, for groundwater conservation grants within the Phoenix AMA. After considering all of these recommendations and the money that will be available, he decided to maintain 2020 water management assistance program fee at 25 cents at this time and assess future needs after these additional monies have been allocated. So for 2020, the withdrawal fees will remain at $3.25. Again, 25 cents for the water management assistance program, 50 cents for the admin and enforcement, and $2.50 for the water bank. And just to sum up the amount of money that we currently have available, after we consider all the encumbered or committed funds for the ongoing projects that we have been approved and are currently in process, we're looking at $507,000 available within the water management assistance program fund through the withdrawal fees. Again, this is in addition to the $1,245,000 in the grant money.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Frank.
If we go through this process that we're going through on $1 million plus, and we come out the other side with some projects that are really good, that we all think are worthwhile, but there isn't adequate funding, is there a chance to consider those in funding from this source?
Definitely. And Melissa also touched on it, but maybe just to clarify, and I think we talked about it in previous meetings. So this grant money is going to be monitored under the Water Management Assistance Program. We just track them separately, so we would see the different projects and the different programs. But definitely, if we do decide that there are projects that are worth funding and we do not have sufficient fund from the grant, we can definitely consider them for the Water Management System Program withdrawal fees pot of money.
And we certainly want to protect our ongoing commitments to several programs in there, but we still have the possibility to look at that.
Correct, sir.
Thank you.
So, so really briefly, I want to go over the projects that we currently have funded or ongoing. The first at the top is the Water Conservation Management Program that expired at the end of October. We do have Mr. Chris Friedman here to talk about the achievements of the program and ask for renewal of funds. So this will be coming up shortly, and the rest of the projects in the bottom or below that are projects that have been renewed and are currently ongoing. Moving on to the second page, we're looking at the status of the project and breaking down the fund a little better. Again, this is only the withdrawal fee, and this is that colorful sheet in front of you. You can just scroll down. It should be, here we go. So current projects and encumbered funds are in the first section. We have all of those projects. Some of them, mainly the Surprise Airscape Demonstration Garden, we already funded one portion of it. The other ones are still in process of writing the contracts, mentioning it does take time. We do have ongoing projects that we have funds dedicated for, which is conservation, outreach and messaging, and water level monitoring within the active management areas. And as I mentioned, we have a renewal request this meeting for Water Conservation Management Program, which has been funded for 2 years at $216, which is $108,000 per year. And other projects in the bottom that needs development. These are projects that have been mentioned at some point, but we did not want to put a money amount to them because we're not sure. It needs to be further developed and looked at. The other projects that you, or the other sheets that you may want to refer to are just breaking down the same exact projects per the category, which is the augmentation, conservation, as well as monitoring and assessing of water availability, which the Water Management Assistance Program fund those 3 different categories, and the next one is dividing those projects per sector. So I can either take questions about any of the projects, about the remaining funds, and if not, we can move on to Mr. Friedman to talk about the Water Management or Water Conservation Assistance Program.
Yes, Dave.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question about the water level monitoring program and just the timing of that. It says it's an ongoing standing item.
So this is part of ADWR activities within the AMAs with our field service. This is not something that we have dedicated a specific program or project, but these are just activities that are happening and something that we're currently keep on working on.
So it looks like in the description this is tied to the Buckeye waterlogging area. Is that?
No. Where did you say in the title?
The back side of that. No, on this. On your 11 by 17. On your 11 by 17.
Okay, perfect. So I would say some of it may be going through the Buckeye waterlogged, but this is just any activity that happens within the active management area in Phoenix.
So it's broader than this?
Correct.
Okay.
And I'll make sure to clarify that in the definition.
And
Yes,
I
yes,
remember,
Ron.
I remember a few years ago when the budgets were so tight that we recommended doing some monitoring. That's one of the most important things that we do AMA-wide, just to get an idea, a sense of where water levels are. And so that we were funding piezometers, however you say that word, to try to know what those were. And this was a way that we could boost some of the ongoing efforts of the department through our AMA to help fund that.
And that bring a thought to my mind. If that's something you're interested in, we could have our field service people come and talk about the efforts and the monitoring that they're doing within the AMA.
And you may want to bring some of the impacted jurisdictions, because I think that was also about the same time as there was a legislative renewal process that had to occur several years ago.
For the Buckeye waterlogged, are you referring?
Right.
Yeah, and that's a great point. EDWR is currently working on a hydrologic study of the Buckeye waterlogged area conditions, and the deadline for EDWR to submit this study is December 15th, so it's coming up in about a month for the legislators about these conditions in the Buckeye waterlogged area.
So we could tie those together into one presentation, maybe?
Yeah, or maybe have two different ones. That might be a good idea.
Now that we have the next two meetings agendas scheduled, can we invite Chris up? And
please.
Chris Fredman, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Without glazing over eyes, hopefully. My name is Chris Fredman. I operate and facilitate the Water Conservation Management Program that is overseen by the East Maricopa Natural Resource Conservation District out on the east side of town, where we cover all of Phoenix AMA. So, for a little bit of background about the program, if you don't know, I don't have a presentation, but so bear with me as we just kind of go through some of these numbers. Some of the things that we focus on are technical irrigation services that involve assessing current irrigation practices by growers within the AMA and then helping them become a little more efficient, whether that's through management practices or actually recommending some structural changes. Most of the successes that we see come from management practices, not necessarily structural. And some of those would be things like irrigation scheduling or manipulation of border sizes, or I also know some of this technology may not be familiar to you, but basically how the system is set up. We target about 40 of those a year, and we do that successfully without any problem. Once growers get their hands on that information, it seems to be pretty valuable to them, and they always want more. But we try to, as Chairman and I were speaking earlier, we try to target as many growers as we can and as many new ones as we can every year to have the biggest impact that we can have throughout the AMA. That being said, though, we do get repeat ones, and that's also just as equally as valuable because they're always changing and adapting things to help themselves get more efficient. Doing structural things, that doesn't necessarily mean that they understand how to manage them quite right. That being said, we do also have earmarked 20 technical irrigation services in addition to those 40 full system evaluations. And those technical services can be anything from, just going out and checking soil moisture levels with people and helping them identify when they're going to need to come back with water rather than being too early or too late. And then we also do 4 promotional or educational or outreach type activities throughout the course of a contract year. So that being said, is there any questions about the foundation or kind of what the program does as a whole? Anybody that's not familiar with it? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Dave.
I have a a question about what the money goes to. Is the money to pay for staff to assist
Bulk
the
of it
growers?
the bulk of it is staff. Most of the equipment's already is obtained as well through that to execute whatever services need to be done.
Okay. Do you provide soil moisture probes to growers?
No.
You don't. You just
No, we go out with our own probes and probe the soil with them and educate them on how to do it. We don't provide them the tools.
okay. And you're working across the AMA?
Yes.
So from Tonopah and Roosevelt Irrigation District all the way over to Queen Creek and New Magma?
Yep, all the way almost to Florence. Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Burn up the highway. Some of the successes we've had over this last contract that we've had with ADWR was over the last 2 years, and some of those successes that I'd like to just kind of highlight. And one recently, we were actually invited down by DWR to sit down and go over some of the ag BMP stuff. I know there's been some questions and concern from the ag community about how that's structured, how it relates to them from a practical sense, from its initial inception to what was actually being seen in the field. So as far as the district was concerned, and myself personally, it was a great opportunity to have that ability, the technical ability to come in and provide some guidance on that. So we appreciated that. Some of the other things too is more directly related to the program. We had a grower out in Tonopah actually that specifically stated how he was able to save half of his annual water usage, not his labor, not fertilizer, anything like that, but his actual water usage by working with us at identifying how to irrigate his alfalfa crop during the off season. He was maintaining his current irrigation system, his current irrigation frequency as he would do during the summertime. He would continue doing it through the winter. We went through and educated him and showed him how it changes through the seasons. He was able to actually cut that by his estimation by half, which was dramatic. Another grower we had over about a 675 acre foot water savings estimated by him by just providing some recommendations on how to even up his advance times. So the time that the water took to get from the ditch in to the end of the field, and how it moved evenly or unevenly, and all those kind of things. And so some of the suggestions that we made to him helped him improve that situation, sped up his irrigation time, still met the demands of the crop and the soil, and saved him, like I said, according to him, about 675 acre feet, just over 3 irrigations. We do hold, like I said, or try to accomplish we accomplish 4 outreach activities, whether they're through workshops or newsletters, or just participating in other type outreach programs. We did hold a conservation tillage and water management workshop where we brought people in from all over the country, really. We had some guys from the Midwest that brought in a piece of equipment called a no-trip or one-tripper. So one piece, and Mr. Rayner knows all about that, but where we could come in and minimize how much deep tillage we're doing on our soil to reduce how much water is used, especially in the beginning of the growing season. So we had some of that equipment there. We had local tractor dealers donate tractors so that we can, and then a local farm out in Buckeye that hosted the event, so that we could actually operate it and demo it for the people that were there. And some of the bigger producers in the AMA have actually ended up buying some of that equipment or some sort of equipment relative to that to help them in their programs. Like I said, I wasn't expecting such a great turnout, so I didn't do a whole. I brought enough handouts for the board, but not enough for everybody else. Growers are participants with the program. And again, this is an average over 5 years, but you can see, gross estimated acres that are impacted on an annual basis are about 23,700 acres. And estimated water saved is over 9,000 acre feet. And to place a monetary value on that kind of helps the growers, but in this case, obviously, we're more concerned about what we're doing with the water. And the water values change from district to district. But that's a pretty big impact. And then the gross, to further that point, the estimation for the benefit of the program, like Annette was saying earlier, we're at about $216,000 for the program for 2 years, $108,000 for 1 year. Growers on an annual basis are estimating the value of this program, the services that they receive from this program, to be about $365,000. And that's what they do is they generally, I ask them to provide a value per acre. If this was something that they would have to pay for these type of services, what they would pay per acre, and this is what it comes out to. And again, it's all based on them. So taking that into consideration, the amount of water saved and everything, to kind of put it into layman's terms, or maybe some other way that other way to kind of look at this. There's about 27,500 households worth of water that's saved approximately by having this program. And that would be based on a 4-person household, or about 110,000 individuals. That's a big chunk of water. So as we continue to have this positive impact in the industry, we are requesting that we are able to continue doing that through your support. As much as we appreciate it up to this point, we sure would appreciate, and I'm sure the rest of the industry would too. To piggyback this, we do have some upcoming events coming up too that people from the west side will definitely be invited. We're planning on holding an Ag BMP workshop in February. DWR people there, so that we can update growers. One of the main things that I like to try to do is keep everybody in the loop. So what's going on with new programs, whether it's ADWR or it's even NRCS. So in this workshop, like I said, hopefully we'll have ADWR there, and we'll have some updates on what's going on with the Ag BMP program, how that relates to people who are already in the program, how it's going to relate to people that want to enroll, all of those ins and outs of it, plus the NRCS and what programs they have, the new Farm Bill and all that kind of thing, all those kind of things, and how it impacts things moving forward. So with that, any questions?
Ron, you get to ask the first question or make the first observation.
No, I think that program's a good one because it helps people to have, an outside person come in and help them evaluate it. And it's always a little bit difficult, on your own operation. You kind of watch things like that because it means money in your pocket. But to have an outside technician to come in, you're measuring water going in, you should be measuring it going out, and then also checking the depth of application. So it's one thing to remember, even though the individuals have saved that amount of water, I always contend that even when you were inefficient, the water wasn't lost to the world. I mean, it's either deep percolation, and the only person you were costing was yourself, because you either put it below the root zone of the plant or you ran it off and someone else captured it and used it. So at least we're making more efficient use of it on our own operations, getting more value from it. Thank you, Chris.
You bet. Thank you.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chris. I certainly understand and agree with Ron relative to the benefit to the growers to have somebody to help them. I'm curious in better understanding sort of the actual type of work that you do out in the field. And so you mentioned this BMP workshop in February.
Mm-hmm.
Can you let us know specifically when that is? I'd be interested in in going or having one of my staff go just to better understand the types of activities that you do.
I would think that would be great, yes.
Okay. SRP used to do a lot of work with, and still does some work with its growers on this, but they've learned over the years and handle it themselves. Are any of the SRP farmers in your program, or?
There are a few, and SRP is somebody that we would like to, because we used to coordinate or cooperate with SRP quite a bit more in the old days.
Right.
That's another relationship I think we would like to get reunited.
Okay. Well, I'd be interested in finding out a little bit more about the workshop that you plan on having.
Definitely.
So appreciate that. Thank you.
Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. You do have a email distribution list, right, that you send those notifications?
Yeah, I'll just need to add them, yes.
Excellent.
That would be all right if you can get that to me.
So I can connect you.
Okay.
And if I could, please just toot the horn of ADWR real quick. You know, on the ground, and this GUAC, on the ground, you know, there's always talk about, especially when the water contingency plan was coming up and people were going to get curtailments. We do have one of probably the most proactive and effective groundwater management situations, I think, out of all of our neighboring states, and it's because of it. Everybody sitting here and everyone in the field appreciates it. I don't always agree with all the decisions made, but definitely the efforts made, and there's a reason why we're in a situation we're in versus California. So appreciate it.
Frank, comments?
Just thank you for the good work you're doing, and you know, we here we get involved in a lot of intellectual ideas, but in the end, what matters is what happens on the ground, and saving the water and helping people to do what they want to do with less water. That's what it's all about, and thank you for doing this.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Chris, before you leave,
yes, sir.
Put your hand out. I think the request is $108,000 per year for 2 years.
Yes, sir.
To continue your current program. And thank you very much for responding to ANOV's phone call late last week to get you to come to this. Sure. It would be nice if we could see a couple of the pictures like this new till.
No-till thing, yes.
And some of those things to get clear understanding of what you're dealing with. In your last column, it says $36,000 times 10. What does the 10 represent?
Well, if you look down at the bottom of it, it's just because it didn't fit. To make the graph correctly, I had to abbreviate that dollar amount on the graph itself. But if you look down at the bottom of that column, there's a little star and a value. That's the actual value of that.
Okay.
The page.
Yeah.
So these other columns
Yeah.
have been too high.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
We'll give them another access over here for example.
Yes.
Just some more papers.
I would invite you to look at any of the annual reports that we submit every year too, because in those annual reports and even the quarterly reports that we submit that list our deliverables as we achieve them, there are pictures and things and summaries of those events.
Okay.
So, and those are open. I don't know if they're online or not, but they're definitely available at any time.
So we actually, Melissa, worked really hard to put all of the current water management system program projects online with the reports. So we have a brand new webpage which we can share with you next meeting because we had a full booked meeting. So yeah, and these reports are also there.
Fantastic. Good.
Yes. So do I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the water management program request.
Second.
In the amount of?
$8,000 per year for 2 years.
Yes. Okay, there's a motion and a second by Frank. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
If anybody has any questions for me after the meeting too, by all means, I'm more than happy to talk to you.
Yeah, he's looking for new clients, so help him out, guys. Moving on to item 6, Area Director Report. ANOV.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. I'm going to go, I'll try to do it relatively briefly. I know we have about 10 more minutes. But one activity that took place in October 10 that I think will be in the interest of everyone here is the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council Committee, the AMA Post 2025. This is, and I mentioned that in previous meetings, this is one of 4 committees of the Governor Water Council, and they met the first time in October 10th. I believe some people in the room have attended. I don't know if any of the members have had a chance to either listen in or be present.
Did anybody attend that's present here in the audience? There's one. Anybody on the council?
I came in late.
Okay.
You were here.
I was listening.
Thanks for
Very
coming.
good.
So this committee is chaired by Mr. Tim Tomure, who is Governor Water Council and a Tucson GOAC member, as well as by Warren Tenney, who is, again, a Water Council member and the MWA director. The goal of the committee is to identify water management challenges facing the active management areas and generate strategic solutions for 2025 and beyond. The approach involves, one, reflecting of the past 40 years of the Water Management and the Groundwater Management Act in the active management areas, while identifying some of today's problems and challenges that would face and are facing the active management areas, and 2, proposing solutions and strategies for addressing the challenges for the active management areas post-2025. To accomplish this task or these tasks, the committee will compile a list of challenges. It will categorize and refine them, and this will be followed by an analysis to prioritize those challenges that were identified. The committee will then present those findings to the council for review, the Governor's Water Council, and the target date for those for the presentation of these strategies and challenges to the council is December 2020. So the committee will take more or less this next year to start diving into all the challenges and start prioritizing as to what could be addressed first and moving forward. In 2021, the work will begin to develop some of those solutions and strategies to address those prioritized challenges and issues. So this first meeting was focused on pretty much laying the groundwork of the committee's activities. It included presentation by ADWR staff regarding some of the successes of the Groundwater Management Act and some of the impact, the positive impact the Arizona water management policies and programs have had in the past 40 years since the Groundwater Management Act has been enacted in place. Then the committee members and participants were asked to start identifying some of those issues and solutions and challenges that are facing the AMAs and or will face the AMA as we move beyond 2025. And actually, there are a lot of really good topics and a lot of good discussions that emerged during this meeting. But this is just the beginning of the discussion. In the next several meetings, more of these issues and challenges will emerge, and then again, the prioritization process will take place. Membership for this committee is open to anyone that is interested in this topic. The only commitment that the co-chairs made is that those that are interested in becoming members will be active and contributing to the discussion and to the work of the committee. If you are interested, let me know and I'll connect you with the coordinator of this specific committee. The committee will meet in December 9th. This is their next meeting at 2 p.m. And they will meet here at ADWR at this exact conference room 3175. Whenever I get these correspondences, I forward them to the GOAC interested parties. If you do not receive them, please do sign at the back. We have a sign-in sheet, and let us know that you would like to be added, and we'll make sure first you get the correspondences regarding GOAC meetings, but also regarding any of the GOAC as well as this specific committee, because I do believe we're all here to care for water management in the AMA currently and in the future. They're all open to the public, and they're also recorded, so if you cannot attend one of them or haven't had a chance to attend, you can find those recordings on the Governor's Water Council webpage. And again, if you have issues or troubles finding these, I'll be happy to send you the link. And that sums up the first section of my report. I'll be happy to take any questions or move on to the second part.
Questions or comments from the council members? Seeing none. What about the audience? Any questions or comments on that report? Proceed, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The second topic, I just want to touch briefly. It is the 2019 Pinal Active Management Area Updated Model. You may have heard lately in the media about water challenges in the Pinal County, in the Pinal area, in Pinal AMA. So I just want to briefly provide some context to some of these discussions and media reports. These reports emerged mainly because of several activities that take place in the Pinal Active Management Area, including ADWR releasing the 2019 updated Pinal model a few weeks ago, October, sometime mid-October. And this model, this updated model, projected some unmet water demands in the Pinal Active Management Area in the next 100 years. So some background to the Pinal updated model release. Prior to 2013, assured water supply applicants submitted analytical and local numeric models. Then in 2014, ADWR completed a regional numerical groundwater model for the Pinal Active Management Area, which was developed to be used for many purposes, including the assured water supply program. And just to understand, for those of us who are not modelers, such as myself, to understand the difference between the analytical and the numerical models, I'll use our chief hydrologist comparison, and he compared between the rotary dial phone and a smartphone, so just so you can get an idea of what's the difference of those models. In 2019, which is, again, as I mentioned, about a month ago, ADWR completed an updated numeric model that and applied a 100-year assured water supply projection to this model. That model projected total demand of about 81 million acre-feet in the next 100 years. It also could only simulate a demand of 73 million acre-feet, which left about 8 million acre-feet as unmet demand within the Pinal Active Management Areas as we look to the next 100 years. So that being said, a new Pinal local stakeholder group was just formed to start discussing the ways in which water users in the Pinal area may address some of these unmet demand. If you're interested in this activity of this local Pinal local group, there is a relatively new House ad hoc committee on groundwater issues within the Pinal AMA, and that was the format that the platform that this model was released. These activities are open to the public, and also they are recorded and can be found on the Pinal County webpage. So please feel free to refer to that and to any other future activities that may emerge from these meetings. That sums up my report, Mr. Chair.
Questions, comments, Frank?
Mr. Chairman, I liked that analogy of the rotary dial versus the smartphone. My question is you're so young, have you ever used a rotary dial?
I have used it, yeah.
In the last year, I had a chance to try one, and boy, was it hard.
Especially if you have some zeros there, right?
Well, bigger fingers don't work either.
You had to use your pencil.
Good report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions, comments? Anyone in the audience, question, comment? Enob, as I understand it, you're saying that the Pinal AMA is going to experience a 8 million acre-foot shortfall in the next 100 years?
Correct, as the model projected, 8 million acre-feet of unmet demands.
10%.
Well, it's fairly close, I guess. The question is, does that information get to the demographers and the policymakers, et cetera, and begin to have some impact within the policy community of Pinal County about what kind of future development occurs?
So there is a local stakeholder group that just emerged. It's co-chaired by Supervisor Miller of Pinal County and two other entities, mainly from the municipal sectors, but it is intended to include all the different sectors within the Pinal Active Management Area, and it has been approved by the House Ad Hoc Committee, so there is a House committee that is tasked with helping address or at least flesh out some of these issues within the Pinal Active Management Area.
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
I'm going to ask a serious question.
Mine wasn't.
No. My earlier one was not. Not yours. Yours is great. I have a vague recollection that in terms of a goal, that here in the Phoenix AMA and in the Pima AMA, that the goal for conservation was safe yield. But do I remember that at some point in time in Pinal County that the goal was not safe yield? The goal was, in fact, to draw down the water supply? Did I have this wrong?
The goal, no, you have it correct. So the goal in Phoenix, Tucson, and Prescott, in a slightly different verbiage in Santa Cruz, is to reach or maintain safe yield. For the Pinal AMA, it's to maintain the agricultural economy for as long as feasible while considering non-agricultural needs. So it is not based on the safe yield goal, correct?
Would you say that again, Dave?
I would say there's more of a preference for maintaining the agricultural uses in the Pinal AMA over the municipal use.
And that was a conscious choice.
Yeah. Right. But that does have an impact on, residential M&I development.
It does, correct.
If you're making a conscious effort to maintain your ag, you got to modify your development desires.
Or bring in other alternative water supplies for municipal. I mean, that's indirectly, that's what they agreed to when they set the goal.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Ron.
Make a comment in that respect. If you'll recall, during the time when the Groundwater Management Act was being crafted, a lot of discussion. Of course, a lot of ag people were upset to be drawn into being regulated, basically. But, one of the things that the ag community believed that they were getting that was an economic benefit from restricting the amount of water you could pump was the conversion capability from an irrigation grandfathered right over to basically it was the Type 1. And that 3 acre-feet conversion that you were allowed, it was always anticipated that would be water you could pump for residential use. And then a few years later, along came the Assured Water Supply Rule and the Groundwater Replenishment District. And so that allowed development basically outside the areas where irrigated agriculture took place. So originally, the concept was that you were going to direct development on irrigated lands, and so you simply affected a conversion of the water use from ag over to urban use. And frankly, the Assured Water Supply rules and the subsequent replenishment district ran around that, because then you could develop out in the desert and every places. You could even drill wells where there's none before, as long as you had water there, and then you could buy replenishment credits. But I think we're starting to see now the bad aspect of doing that, because even in Pinal County, if you'd converted basically the whole AMA over to M&I uses at 3 acre-feet per acre, you wouldn't be as far off from being in balance as what you might think, especially with the CAP water having been brought in at a later time. So anyway, we've created a big area of consumption that were outside those original irrigated lands, and we're going to pay the price for it.
Anything further on your report?
No, sir. That sums up my
Okay,
report.
let's move on to what everybody in the audience has been waiting for, their opportunity. Call to the public. Seeing none, call to the council.
None here.
Seeing none, next agenda items, you've got several. Can you remind us what those are?
So we will, yes, I will go over the new webpage that we have for the Water Management Assistance Program project. As well as contact Field Service to talk about some of the monitoring activities that they have been participating in the Phoenix AMA, and also talk about the Buckeye waterlogged area hydrologic study that will be released and distributed to the legislators in December 15. Another topic that would come up in the next meeting is the GOAC members need to make a decision on chair and vice chair every 2 years. So next meeting will be that time to do so. So just to point that out, and we'll make that as an agenda item for action. And that's all I can think of at that point. Oh, and one important thing, depending on where we'll be in the Water Management Assistance Program grant cycle, we'll talk about where we are and schedule dates for those presentations for however long we anticipate them taking.
When will the next meeting be?
Great question. It could be sometime in February, March, preferably March, because that would give us some more time to go over the Water Management Assistance Program applications that we receive. If you have a desire to meet earlier, we can look into doing something like that sometime, maybe late winter, early spring.
Any other items you'd like to add to the list? Seeing none, are there any objections for us adjourning the meeting? Meeting is now adjourned at 11:35. Only took 2 hours to get through all of that. Thank you for that.
It's getting better, you get more efficient. Last time it was 2.5, you get more efficient. Thanks, Chris. You bet.
We wanted to